Let's all welcome Paolo Garcia.
Hey guys, so like Ron said, we'll be talking about the history of soul, funk, and R&B music here in the Philippines. Can anyone tell me what soul music is, or your understanding of soul music? Anybody? All right, yeah.
Black music.
Black music, that's right.
Black music, incorporating blues and gospel.
That's right. So before we get started, I want to let you know that essentially all these genres that you just mentioned, be it gospel music, soul music, R&B music, rock music, reggae music, jazz music, these are all forms of black music. It's all black music. So it was a form of music that was born out of pain and suffering. It's like a pain language for them to escape the troubles of their day. They turn to music. So soul music is a very uplifting form of music. It blew up all over the world because it was very easy to dance to. The reason why it blew up mainly because of Motown. So you're all familiar with the label Motown, which is based in Detroit, which spawned artists like Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, The Temptations, and whatnot. Back in the day, a big hit in the 60s was a Temptation song called Get Ready. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Get ready, get ready. So a lot of Pinoy bands learned how to play that song along with other songs because it was so easy to play, really. Very simple, stripped down, but you know, groovy, funky, something you can move to. So yeah. In the beginning, let's start in the 60s. My lecture will be centered mostly around the 60s and 70s. I'm not going to expand so much on the 80s and 90s because there's a different landscape musically. But in terms of soul music, as early as the 1960s, its presence was already here. In the beginning, it was mostly covers. Filipinos, the term back then, if you were a part of a band in the 60s, usually they were called combo bands. Back in the day, mga combo. So if you were considered a good band back then, you had to be placado. That was the term, and the root word of that is placa, meaning the vinyl record. So you had to sound exactly like the band sounded on the vinyl record for you to be the shit. You know, so. Basically, that's what happened. There were a couple of artists who stood out during that time. Helen Gamboa being one of them. Pedito Corrales was also doing a lot of soul covers. Back then, Tito Soto had a band called the Tilt Down Men in the 1960s, yeah. And they were doing mostly soul covers. This was before VST in the 70s and before all the disco. So, this is what was happening in Manila. A lot of what I'm talking about is references to stories that my father told me as well, because my father was also a part of a band in the 70s. So his recollections of that era
Ask him what band.
My dad was a part of Hot Dog. I don't know if you're familiar with Hot Dog. Yeah, you know, Manila, Ikaw ang Miss Universe, Bongga Kaday, Ani Batong Bakal, all that shit. Most of that was like from the 70s. But prior to that, my father was already playing in the 60s with a band called Red Fox. And they were mostly doing rock covers. Led Zeppelin, Cream, Jimi Hendrix, Santana, shit like that. But, so that was the first introduction to the music in the Philippines, I think. Because of the Motown explosion that happened. It was kind of like a chain reaction. It wasn't just the Philippines, like all over the world, people who were dancing to Motown. So it was only natural for us to adapt and take that in and interpret it in our own way. So while all of this was happening in Manila, you all know that the Americans had set up base here. There were American bases in Clark and Olongapo. Olongapo being the main music capital at the time, really, because you had all these soldiers coming in with their American music, schooling the Filipinos, forming bands with Filipinos, and teaching them how to play their music. So, in Olongapo, in the late 60s, early 70s, there were two main roads that the soldiers would go to. One road was called Magsaysay. That's where all the white people go if they want to hear rock and roll. And all the blacks and Latinos will go to the Jungle Avenue, which is Rizal. And this is where all the soul and the funk and the black music was to be found. Back in the day, that really was the musical capital. There were a lot of bands thriving, you know, making music then, black music, white music even, rock music. But Gapo basically spawned a lot of acts that kind of, you know, enforced the soul movement here in the Philippines, because a lot of the players were black. Minsan may mga singers were black. Like, for example, there was a band called the Howlers. The Howlers was all Filipino band except for the singer. The singer was this black guy named Andre Wilson. And they used to do James Brown covers, you know, Tower of Power, just a lot of funky music. So, yeah, Gapo is definitely on the map, you know, because of that. In Manila, it's a different story. Most of the music was happening along Rojas Boulevard. If you were really looking for soul and funk music, you go to the Flames Bar. The Flames Bar is where, some of those bands from Gapo would play. Some of the bands who were based here in Manila at the time had stemmed from a group that had spawned the likes of Celeste Legaspi, Tilly Moreno, Haji Alejandro, Rayan Fuentes, etc. So these are all artists from the 70s who were making soul music. Like I said, in the beginning it was mostly just covers. People were interpreting Western music in our own way. So minsan, like apart from just basically doing it placado style, where you just mimic what you're hearing on the vinyl record, the age of adaptation came in as well, where they would get the melody and write Tagalog words to suit it. So the lyrics were original, but the melody was like still a cover.
Order taker.
Adaptations. This was around the 70s. Yeah. Let me get to my notes. So I kind of came prepared with a lot of material. I have a lot of music. I have some videos, and I kind of wanna limit my talking and let the music do the talking as well. So maybe I can play some samples. So, okay, so again, let me just backtrack in case you wanted to take notes or something, because I heard this is going to be a part of the test later on, so you might want to remember what I'm saying. Motown was the biggest influence of soul music here in the Philippines. It was a black music. I told you, like I said, it was all stemming from black music. So artists like the Temptations, the Intruders, they were given, there were renditions done by Filipinos like Helen Gamboa, Nita Corrales, Trip Downman. Oh yeah, there was also a show on TV before that was pushing this type of music. It was called The 19ers. And it was on Channel 9, and it was like our version of Soul Train. Are you familiar with Soul Train? The Soul Train! So it was like this black show where you just have a bunch of people dancing, doing, does anyone know what the Cabbage Patch is? Alright, this is the Cabbage Patch. Right, that's an old style of dancing. So that's where you would see them get down. And we had our own version of that apparently back in the 70s. This I only found out last night when I was talking to my dad about it. So, the popularity of soul was slightly diluted when groups like the Beatles came out and rock music had basically taken over by the 70s. So, it wasn't until the late 70s that soul kind of made a comeback in the form of disco music. Disco music was more of, dance music. All the music you listen to now, like house and EDM, all that doops, pour on the floor, that it all stems from disco music. Disco music was doing that years ago. So, other examples of soul R&B acts who were prevalent during the 70s were artists like Sly and the Family Stone, Earth, Wind and Fire, James Brown, Tower Power, Jackson 5, etc. Like everyone knows Michael Jackson. Yeah, Michael Jackson had come from the J5, his brothers, where they were doing Motown stuff. And then we talked about the American Soldiers and Clark Olongapo. The two main roads, Magsaysay, where all the white soldiers would go to listen to rock, and then what they called the jungle, or Rizal Avenue, where all the blacks and Latinos would go to hear funk and soul music. Some of the artists who came out of Gapo at the time were the Soul Jugglers, Hangman, a band called Halit, Solid Band, and these were all bands who were basically mimicking black bands. There was choreography involved, how the horn players would move, and whatnot. These were all archetypes of black bands from the States. So, we talked about the word placado, meaning it should sound just like a record. That's how they judge if you're a good band. And then we talked about Rojas. I mentioned the Flames, but there was also a band called the Reels, where you could catch people like Boy Camera and the Afterbirth, which was a pretty popular soul band in the 70s. Emil Mijares and his band, Time Machine, who decided to also play with Celeste Gaspi or Anthony Costello. There was a band called Bits and Pieces. According to my father, the hottest club at the time was this band called Third Eye. And this was right by the side of the Luneta Hotel near Rizal Park. And it was a black band playing there called Masters of Time. And that was the place to go back in the day. Masters of Time, the drummer was actually Filipino. His name is Cesar Cuba, being a good friend of me and Prof. Ronald here. So, we talked about the Howlers. That band from Gapo, where the main vocalist, his name was Andre Wilson, was the lead vocalist. To this day, people are still looking for this guy. A lot of people thought he was dead, but apparently he's somewhere in Japan, and he's still performing. But if you listen to some of those old records, wow man, he's so amazing. And I'm gonna let you hear some samples. So let me take a break. I'm going to play some music for you. Let's start with what I started with, the 60s. So the 60s, like I said, there was a lot of covers going on. We were basically trying to mimic the hits of the time, which were a lot of soul hits. So one such song I would play, okay, so this is Helen Gamboa.